welcome to the first part of the Resident Evil Halloween special. In this video, we'll be looking at the first version of Resident Evil on all these 4 consoles. We will start with the Sega Saturn, then compare all 4, to continue with the PlayStation and the Nintendo DS, to finally compare all 4 of them again, and finish off with the remaster that came out on the GameCube. Starting with the Sega Saturn, what we're looking at today is actually a port of the original PlayStation version, which was actually released a year earlier. The Sega Saturn wasn't as successful or popular compared to the original PlayStation, selling in at only around 9.2 million units worldwide. That is, of course, compared to the colossal over 100 million units that the PlayStation was able to sell between 1994 and 2006. Unfortunately for the Sega Saturn, it was discontinued in the year 1998 back in the States, 1998 in Europe, and later in the year 2000 in Japan. Resident Evil is likely to be running at a resolution of 320 by 224 on the Sega Saturn. As you guys can see, it's obvious that this is no challenge for the M1 and the MacBook Air. Regarding performance and resources, you guys can see on the top left center area of the screen that the CPU is being used at around 29%, GPU 8%. We have 4.8 gigabytes of used memory, that's including system, and 2.6 gigabytes which are currently available. And last we have our main CPU SoC sensor, which is reading around 49 to 50 degrees Celsius. This is once again on the M1 MacBook Air, which has only 7 GPU cores and 8 CPU cores.
Wesker? Jill? What happened to Jill and Wesker?
Now we can quickly compare the four versions that are being shown here on this video today. On the far left we have the Sega Saturn, followed by PlayStation, then the Nintendo DS, and a remake that was launched for the Nintendo GameCube years later. March 1996, month and year in which Resident Evil was launched in both Japanese and North American markets. The game was debuting on the console for first time ever, and nobody knew actually where this would lead us today. Earlier we saw the version for the Sega Saturn, and that actually was a port of this game which launched about a year and a few months later. But this is actually the original version. The rest of the games are all ports.
Take care.
Wesker? Jill? What happened to Jill and Wesker?
Believe it or not, in January 2006, a port of the original Resident Evil game made its way to the Nintendo DS. Now, this was called Resident Evil Deadly Science. In Japan, it was baptized as Biohazard Deadly Science. Now, it was made to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the Resident Evil series. This specific version includes a classic mode, the original game with minimal enhancements and, touchscreen support, and a rebirth mode, which, containing a greater number of enemies and a series of new puzzles that made use of the platform's capabilities. Also, they kind of revamped the characters because they were remade with better textures and, different clothing and whatnot. However, these graphical changes were actually indeed very difficult to notice on the, low quality DS's dual screens. Now, actually, you are able to appreciate this more on, HD emulators. Now, the game makes use of the dual screen with top screen, for the map, and the other screen, the game. Here on the emulator, you can actually set the screens to be on a horizontal level. So we set the map on the left side and the actual game on the right side. Now, obviously, just looking as we've been through the version for the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation 3, this is the worst of all. I do have to say, though, that it is the quickest and fastest when it comes to loading, but quality-wise, you guys can see that, the Nintendo DS wasn't the best.
Wesker? Jill?
Here we are comparing once again all four versions. As mentioned earlier, PlayStation and Sega Saturn versions are the ones that look most alike. Obviously, one's a port of the other. The version for the DS is actually quite bad, and the Nintendo GameCube is, well, obviously a remake. In 2002, a remake of the original 1996 PlayStation game Resident Evil was released for the Nintendo GameCube. Now, this game initially received popular acclaim on behalf of video game journalists. However, the game sold worse than expected, leading to Capcom to actually change the direction of the series into a more action-oriented approach. In 2008, the game was ported to the Wii, featuring a new control system. In 2014, a high-definition remaster was released to critical and commercial success for PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, Windows, Xbox 360, and Xbox One, then later for Nintendo Switch in 2019. As you guys can see here on screen, compared to the original games from the Sega Saturn, PlayStation, and Nintendo DS, this game looks 100,000 times better. Probably the experience is much better. But one thing is true, the controls are the same. And you clearly understand why Capcom shifted away from this control system to a more action-based game. In short, the game's visuals are top-notch, it looks brand new and fresh. However, the controls make it feel like that old 1996 game.